Once a year, in ancient Israel, an entire nation gathered to confront something invisible: guilt. Not privately, not symbolically, publicly, together. Two goats were brought before the high priest. One would die. The other would carry the failures of an entire people and be sent away into the wilderness. This was the scapegoat. And thousands of years later, we are still performing versions of this ritual. Only now, the goats are human. The story comes from Leviticus chapter 16, the Day of Atonement, known as Yom Kippur. Two identical goats were chosen. Lots were cast. One goat was sacrificed to the Lord. The second remained alive. The high priest placed his hands on its head and confessed the sins of the nation. Their violence, dishonesty, failures, and broken promises. Symbolically, the guilt of the people was transferred onto the animal. Then the goat was led far into the wilderness and released. The sins were not denied. They were acknowledged, carried away, and the community began again. Ancient people understood something modern psychology is still discovering. Human beings need visible actions to process invisible burdens. The Hebrew word connected to this goat is Azazel, a mysterious term scholars still debate. Some interpret it as a wilderness spirit. Others see it as a place of desolation, beyond order and civilization. In the ancient imagination, the wilderness represented chaos, the place outside structure, outside safety. By sending the goat there, the people symbolically returned their disorder to the realm of disorder itself. The ritual ended long ago. The instinct did not. When societies face fear, they look for someone to blame. When families struggle, one person often carries unspoken tension. When organizations fail, responsibility is placed on an individual instead of a system. Psychologists call this scapegoating, transferring collective anxiety onto one person or group. Blame feels like cleansing, even when nothing is actually healed. Healing begins when a community stops asking who to blame and starts asking what must be carried together. Sometimes, scapegoating does not end with a ritual. Sometimes it becomes history. Across generations, entire groups of people have been made to carry the fears, failures, and moral anxieties of societies struggling to understand themselves. Communities labeled as problems rather than participants. Cultures blamed during crisis. People treated not as individuals, but as containers for collective guilt. When blame hardens into systems, it leaves marks that outlive the moment, shaping opportunity, identity, and memory long after the original fear has faded. Psychologists call this historical trauma, the transmission of emotional and social wounds across generations. Unlike the ancient scapegoat, these burdens were never meant to return to the wilderness. They stayed, carried by real people. And what is carried long enough eventually becomes inherited. The ancient ritual depended on one quiet assumption: the scapegoat never returned. The people watched it disappear beyond the horizon, carrying the confessed failures away from the community. But imagine something the scripture never describes. Imagine weeks later, the goat walking back into camp, dust covered, alive, still marked. What would that mean? Its return would silently announce something unsettling. What was sent away was never truly gone. The illusion of cleansing would break. The community would have to confront whether guilt can really be removed without transformation. In many ways, this is the story humans continue to live. What we exile often returns. The blamed family member speaks years later. The dismissed employee reveals deeper problems. The ignored wound resurfaces in another generation. Psychologists call this the return of the repressed. What is pushed away without understanding eventually comes back, demanding attention. The scapegoat, if it returned, would no longer represent sin carried away. It would become a mirror. The ancient ritual contained an uncomfortable honesty. Everyone confessed together. Responsibility was shared. Renewal required acknowledgement before release. Somewhere in the imagination of the ancient world, a goat walked alone into the wilderness, carrying what others could not bear. But perhaps the deeper question is not about the goat that left, but about the things that find their way back. Who do we send into the wilderness today? And what are we avoiding when we hope it never returns?